Now, the COP summit is underway with world leaders discussing how to cut carbon emissions. And one way, as we heard earlier, is to make steel, which of course is needed in almost all construction projects, in a more environmentally friendly way. Now, could that be good news for Teesside? Well, David McMillan has been finding out.
Traditional steelmaking ended on Teesside nearly a decade ago now, but there's a plan to bring a new, greener type of steel production to the area, something very much welcomed in traditional steel communities like Eston.
What would it mean to have some sort of form of steelmaking return to this area?
More jobs, definitely more jobs. The community would change completely, wouldn't it, with more jobs?
I think it would be marvellous for the next generation coming up, give the young ones something to do.
The 250 jobs created would boost the local economy, even if it's still well short of the numbers lost in 2015. But there's another benefit in this form of steelmaking to the environment.
Steel is one of the most important materials on the planet. I mean, just look at the amount of metal in this railway bridge, that pylon, the enormous building being constructed on the banks of the River Tees over there, and then replicate that right through the world. So if you can make more steel using renewable energy, as opposed to colossal amounts of fossil fuel, that should have a huge impact on the environment.
That's what an electric arc furnace is designed to do. The people at the Materials Processing Institute can explain. They have one at the Research Centre in Southbank.
They're essentially a method of making electric or recycling scrap metal into new steel. It is quite a simple process and it's a proven process. So moving from blast furnace technology to electric arc furnace technology is a very positive and important step, both to decarbonise, importantly, but actually it gives us the opportunity of being more competitive.
Earlier this week, an open letter was published in Grangetown calling on politicians to commit to investing in steelmaking and to use British-made steel in new public buildings.
This is an example of what union leaders and community leaders are calling for, a public building being made using British-made steel, in this case, the regeneration of Darlington Railway Station. But how much power do politicians really have to make sure that happens more often?
Well, local Conservatives say they've delivered on their promise to do just that.
We are leading by example on this. The new SEA offshore wind turbine factory, which is currently going up at Tees Works, that is being built using British steel, and that is a really good example of us practising what we preach.
Labour's Tees Valley mayoral candidate says he'd lobby government to use more British-made steel and to get money to revive traditional steel making using sustainable green hydrogen instead of fossil fuels.
Labour's got a commitment to invest up to £3 billion into green steel. So electric arc furnace will give us one element of the jigsaw, but the other element of the jigsaw is to get primary steel making back. And I think that's really, really important from a strategic perspective, both for the Tees Valley, but also nationally.
If British Steel's electric arc furnace is built, it won't replace the mass employment that the steel industry once provided here, but it could be the start of something new.
David, let's talk about the future of the steel industry with our guest, Alex Cunningham. It needs government investment, I think, to make these electric arc furnaces happen. The case is being made for that at the moment. Is this a good plan? Will it happen?
Well, I hope it'll happen, and we're still waiting for the final decision. In fact, because I was confused about whether it had been totally agreed or not, I put down a parliamentary question, and apparently there are still ongoing discussions with British Steel and the government in order to discuss whether or not it is going to go ahead on Teesside and elsewhere as well. But yes, I mean, it's a great idea. We need 8 million tonnes, I think, of steel in the coming years in order to do local projects. So a tremendous need there. But we do have to go back to this idea of virgin steel making as well, and hydrogen could actually deliver that for us too.
Yeah, because this is using scrap metal, isn't it? And it's far fewer jobs, obviously, than there was originally at the Redcar Steelworks. So presumably that's the reason why you want primary steel making, which is making steel from scratch.
Well, yes, I want us to restore many of those thousands of jobs that were lost. I mean, there were 3,000 jobs lost in Redcar when the blast furnace was actually closed down, and we need to recreate that. We want to be a world leader in steel making. We can be that, but we've got to look at different ways of doing it.
Andrew Johnson, I mean, we don't know whether the government will back this plan. Should they? And actually, West Cumbria, of course, also had a very fine history of steel making, which is kind of long gone now. But could it come back with this kind of initiative?
Look, I think potentially it could. Look, I think it's a great opportunity for Teesside, and I think it's great for Britain globally as well to be leading in green production of steel. The only slight transition is, or the only slight flaw is, it's going to take quite a while to get there. So we will, to come back to the earlier point, in the short term, still need some coke and coal to produce steel.
You managed to get the mine back in.
Certainly in the core. Look, to deliver.
I think it's only Conservatives that I did try in the mine to see if they'd advocate for it, but they didn't even reply to my emails about coal. But anyway,
regardless of where it comes from, in the short term, to deliver the quantities of steel that we just talked about, we're going to need some form of non-electrification, traditional methods of steel production. But I think it's a good opportunity for Teesside. But one thing it really does reinforce is the need for significant new energy generation, particularly from my perspective, new nuclear, the SMR programme, renewable energy, all vital components if we're really going to lead the world in environmentally clean and sustainable steel production.
So you back the trade unions have got a tremendous campaign going over down in South Wales and other parts of the country to actually have the new generation of virgin steel making. Do you back that project? Do you back them?
Look, I want to see Britain be at the forefront of steel manufacture again. Absolutely, I want us to see us be competitive on a global stage in terms of steel production. Cost and quality, absolutely vital as part of that. Well, probably what we can't do is be too prescriptive to particularly businesses as to where they buy that steel. Personally, I'd have a strong preference for buying it from the UK.
You say that, so you wouldn't say that we have to say British steel into public buildings necessarily?
I think that would probably be incredibly prescriptive, to be honest with you. And look, when we deliver any major project, value for taxpayers has got to be absolutely paramount as well. Of course you want to support jobs, but it's taxpayers' money at the end of the day to deliver a lot of these projects.
Let's put that to Alex Cunningham. That's sensible, isn't it? Because there is an expense here. You can't say that British steel will be in every public building.
Yeah, well, we have got to have value for money. There's no two ways about that. But we've got to play the long game as well. We know that there's going to be a tremendous demand for steel over the next few years, and that's fine. We need to meet that need. But we need to think in terms of 20 years, 30 years' time. How are we going to have an industry that's sustainable over that time and build the future plants, in many decades ahead?
Okay. Andrew Johnson, obviously the Prime Minister has been at the COP summit. He's not an environmental leader anymore, isn't he? I mean, some of the things you talked about, the lack of investment in those, greener energy levels, it just shows that he can't, claim any moral leadership there.
Far from it. Look, Britain still is a global leader in reducing carbon emissions. Out of all of the countries in the G7, I would argue with strong conviction we've made the most progress. We're still one of the most ambitious major economies in the world in terms of decarbonisation. I think what you'll find the Prime Minister has done is reflected upon a current cost of living crisis and also realign some of those targets with the reality,
technological reality. Years, hasn't he?
Not at all. Look at the motor industry.
Was he just realistic, Alex Cunningham?
No, I don't think he was being realistic. I think he's taking some easy options. We need to take tough decisions, and we need a different government in order to do that.
Okay, well, of course, the coal mine did a lot of damage as well, of course. We've got to put moral leadership on that as well, back to that.
Not at all. It's 500 jobs for West Cumbria. Right. The Labour Party opposed.
Nobody in the world respected that decision. They just thought, it's just grabbing onto jobs for you rather than prioritising the environment.
Not at all. There is still a need, like the new oil and gas licences, there is still a need in the short term for fossil fuels.
You say so, obviously. Thank you very much, anyway. You've made your case.